Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Drone Out. Tonight we are joined by our Lord and Master, Andrew / Frank.
Good evening.
My darling wife.
Bonjour.
The lovely, beautiful, talented Blue Owl.
Oh, thank you. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Everyone's favourite curry kitten.
Hello.
And the amazing Ben Hack.
Hello.
And tonight, I'm Brighton Till I Fly. And tonight we are talking about right to repair. So Ben's covered a podcast just recently with Lewis Rossman, who, if you don't know, he's on YouTube and he runs a Mac repair in New York, like a little, like MacBook repair, and he's like campaigning to go against right to repair. This summer we've had
to be for right to repair.
And this summer over here we've had new legislation for right to repair rules put in place, which kind of help things. But I mainly wanted to cover this episode as an excuse to talk to Ben and see whether we can convince him that FPV drone racing is something he might want to have a go at. And failing that, if he gets too bored, he can talk about Linux commands with Curry Kitten and try and teach us stuff about electronics. So you used to run the Ben Heck show on Element 14, and
I didn't run it. I was just like
the star, the
talent, or whatever you call it. But I did that for 8 years on YouTube.
That is some service. We're our show's 5 years now, and slowly going down in popularity, I'm sure.
Well, there's always the peaks and valleys.
But it's just pure trough here that Tony eats out of. But we've all kind of got into electronics because we fly these racing drones. You might have seen them. They're like made out of carbon fiber, and they're super fast and deadly, and they'll follow you home and spy on your wife.
It has a fixed camera on it. There's some gimbal stabilization, I assume, right?
No, fixed camera, and we whack a GoPro on top, and that's how we roll. And,
what do you race? Where do you race them? Like through obstacle courses, or houses, or electric wires?
We can set up courses, and we sometimes have bandos. A lot of us mainly fly freestyle or just for fun. You can have race gates with. It's got a analog VTX transmitter, video transmitter on them, and we can use that for the spike in signal strength. Gives us our lap times and stuff like that, or we can just fly and dive big buildings or have good fun and all like that.
Oh, that's why you run a GoPro, so you have a high resolution image on it, because what's transmitted is probably a low bandwidth.
Yeah, exactly. We keep it nice and low for latency.
That makes sense. Oh, especially if you're racing. Yeah.
So, but we still crash and stuff, but there's slowly there's been new technology and stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've seen something on GitHub.
GitHub?
Yep. Yep. Oh, thank you, Aries. All right, so on the show, if someone does a super chat, we tend to light fireworks. So this show's pretty relaxed and random.
Wow, 10 pounds. That's like $1 million American.
It is $1 billion.
Well, no, only $500,000 after the Brexit currency thing, but whatever.
Yeah. Not is only our camera angle fixed, but there's a whole subgenre in flying. So it's like, as a beginner, you'll be flying it quite flat. As you speed up, you're leaning the quad further forwards, and thus your camera angle's going up. Blue Owl's a psychopath. She flies at 65 degrees. So if she's landing, she's just looking up at the sky all the time.
Well, that's how helicopters work, right? They're usually slightly forward or angle. Is that wrong?
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's
right.
absolutely right.
That's
Yep.
the idea.
But generally not 65 degrees. But
I would just kill you.
65 degrees would almost be like a flying pancake, right? Well,
That's-
about like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You either look at the sky, or if you're lucky, you can look backwards.
Yeah, 'cause
the only
But
good,
then,
I suppose if you flew at that angle, you're basically pulling yourself through the air volume sideways, right? For speed.
Mhm.
yeah,
So-
I mean, you can go any direction, really. It's kind of hard to tell when you have such a different angle, because the thing is, your direction of flight will be totally different if your camera is tilted. So you can't really tell whether you're going upside down or forward. You can't really tell with such a high tilt anymore.
yeah, and also when you fly that like that, yaw becomes roll, and roll becomes yaw. And the only benefit we can see is if she accidentally crashes into a wall, she just sticks herself to the wall. That's the only. We've done extensive testing on the reason for blue owl.
Best way to crash.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yes, that's one of the things you can say for sure.
Frank, did you use the Jack's guide to the LDO's guide to right to repair? Did you upload it anywhere?
Frank's looking
He's
cheap.
like, was I supposed to?
The image I gave you last night.
Oh, no, I didn't realize that was what I was meant to be doing. I can do that very quickly though.
Well, while
That's
Frank's doing the
cool.
admin, let me ask both yourself, Jack, and Ben, what is the current situation with the right to repair, both in the UK and the US? Oh, here we go. We've got a little thing which is covering up our guest's face.
Very
Not very well
self-explanatory.
planned.
Well, no, I like the stick figure. That implies I've lost weight, so that's
I
fine.
saw my name and silly.
No, that
ears.
one was Tony. Yeah, do you want me to go through it quickly?
Oh, I think you should. I mean, that was a great diagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, plus we're an audio podcast as well, and our audio listeners
Oh.
won't be able to
Yeah,
see
but
it.
I'll read it out.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
fair enough.
describe it in excruciating detail.
Yeah. You ready, Frank? Have we lost it now? I know. I was a bit scared of it, like in case we were to get sued. But initially, it's a picture of a stick figure, and it goes, "This is Tony. He's hypothetically bought a new pair of BJY goggles, but he's having a few problems. Silly Tony has accidentally, in the next box below, has accidentally and hypothetically plugged 6S into his goggles. Tone, I don't know. I don't own any DJI goggles. This is a digital video system, by the way. But if you plug 6S into them, do they blow up?
Apparently, they can take 6S.
Oh,
The
bollocks.
V2s
Well-
can take success, but let's suggest for the benefit of the diagram, it can't, and it would explode.
Well, no, BJY ones that can't.
Okay.
A question: what's 6S?
Oh,
6-cell
As in
battery.
a 6-cell LiPo battery.
Oh, so you'd be looking at what, about 23 volts?
Yes,
Probably a little bit
around
more
that.
than that. Yeah.
24, 25 are fully charged.
and it then flows into, can I get parts to fix it myself? And then it says, no, at BGI, we don't sell parts directly to the customer, hypothetically. And then the next flow diagram is, you can go two ways. If you go the other way and if you do by third party, it goes to the box at the end that says you avoided your warranty, hypothetically. This is your fault, go away. This is your problem. And in the center is, can I send them to a local repair center? No, at BJY, we don't supply those parts to local suppliers. You have to send them directly to us, so the combined cost of shipping parts and labor work out more expensive than buying the new model, hypothetically. And then you can flow into the other ones of, you avoided your warranty if you're open to have a look at them. We've decided not to make that anymore. Or go away, this is your problem. So yeah. So that was my way of like making this slightly more relatable to FPV, and that slowly, although we've got the open source sort of route that most of us fly on, there's a lot of like closed source hardware and software that we don't have access to, and the further we go on, and if there's no longer a competitor for digital FPV, then we will be forced into these sort of situations. And to go back to your question, Ben, does the UK have right to repair? Ministers have confirmed that from this summer, consumers will have a right to repair on goods that they buy. Manufacturers will be legally obliged to make spare parts for products available to customers for the first time, and is now a new legal right for repairs. This was published on the 10th of March.
Oh, that's good.
So this summer in the UK, manufacturers will be legally obliged to make spare parts in the hope to cut CO2 emissions from making new goods. And this comes from the UK Eco Design and Energy Labelling Regulations 2021, requiring levels of repairability. So,
Right.
When you buy a new white goods, you've got like the energy efficiency label, and it's like A all the way to, is it F or something? I can't remember, but there'll be a repairability scale, and a CO2 emission label, I think.
Oh, a white good. What is that?
Fridge, large white goods that we have in our kitchens. Fridge.
All right, kind of like how they have like the Energy Star rating stickers. At least they do here. It's like, this is how much energy it'll consume over a year. That kind of stuff.
Yes.
Oh, so it'll be on that. Actually, I had to fix my refrigerator. I think it was last year. So yeah, but my fridge, well, it's like 7 years old, which means it's, it doesn't have, I don't even think it has any microchips in it. Well, I mean, now they have fridges with like, that hook up to your cell phone, so you can be at the grocery store and look inside your fridge and see what you're out of. that exists now.
It took me ages to find my washing machine. I wanted a really up-to-date smart washing machine without it connecting to my phone. So it was like trying to get the maximum amount of usability, like hygiene, steam, I don't know, drum clean and all that stuff. We are not talking about drones today. I'm really
right.
Sorry.
But if you get a fridge like that, it ends up having all this connectivity that you didn't want.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be kind of like trying to find a dumb car nowadays. It'd be pretty much impossible. I mean, that's going to be a huge. I mean, now you're talking about drones, but I think in the future, like right to repair as far as vehicles, that's going to be a big issue because, they cram so many microcontrollers into a car these days, and all of the code on those microcontrollers is proprietary software owned by the companies.
Yeah,
I was shocked as well to hear every time they talk about bringing out car software, they seem to write it from scratch, which is like madness because it seems to be like, well. And I got sort of figures of 150,000 lines to sort of 500,000 lines of code for the average car, which is like, that's crazy. How many bugs can be in there?
They write it from scratch for each model or each model year or what?
Some people seem to put it out like it's some sort of big thing. It's like we've thrown away the old stuff and we're writing it. It's all new stuff. And it's like, well, that's madness. When you've got something that's existing, surely you want to build on top of that and take the existing stuff that's working well.
I've never heard of that before. I mean, if that's what they do, that is madness. Unless they like employing tons of programmers for some reason. Like, let's give them lots of work to do. Because think of something like a Toyota. I mean, like the frames on those stay the same for a decade. So it's engineering is about using as much as you can from the past, because then you don't have to redo it because it works.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's not necessarily that. It's just that, if you have, I don't know, like let's say you have your CAN bus system that, it's doing a really good job of talking to the airbags. Like, why would you rewrite that? That seems strange.
I can't be everything.
Oh, not everything. It's like whenever there's like a new model, it's like we've redone this thing and we're doing something else with it. That's what I saw, some stats somewhere. I can't back that up with actual figures. I might be wrong, but I thought that's what I saw. But yeah, I've had to
That seems strange.
literally reboot my car sometimes because it's like the phone system's just going at me instead of someone's voice.
Reboot your car? You mean restart it?
Yeah, essentially. Well, it's same difference, isn't it? I'm turning off and on again, and suddenly it works.
Correct, because it's basically reinitializing everything. How is it? It must be a fairly new car.
It's about 4 years old, but it's still got like everything's linked to the main computer, and thus, if something's going wrong or some sensor's going wrong or something like that, it's often the case of like if we turn it off and we turn it back on, and then suddenly it works. And then you'll find out when you get it serviced, it'll get updated, and they'll put some new firmware on.
Oh, lovely!
Something else has changed.
Well, we live in an age now where we need firmware for our light bulbs, so there's no limit to things we can put firmware on, or firmware for our socks soon. Yeah, I don't know. There's a YouTube channel, is Rich Rebuilds. He buys scrap or wrecked Teslas, and he tries to put them together to create working Teslas, and even that it's quite complicated, and Tesla parts are really expensive, and there's microcontrollers everywhere. And I think that's the problem. Like if it's going to cost you $1,000 to fix your windshield wipers, because we got to have a special microcontroller with digital signal processing, so we have a beautiful windshield wipe. And that's we're pretty much already there. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous.
It gets worse with that. You saying about I'm a big fan of Richard Rebuilds as well. With the Tesla, they glue the cars together.
Yes.
And glue with the spot rivets. And do you know how they're assembled? Everything goes through the windscreen, not through the doors. So there's certain things like the back seats you can't remove via the doors. You have to take the windshield out.
Yeah, they only weld them just enough to hold the pieces in place as the glue cures.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe that's most manufacturers now, not just Tesla. Actually, visited the Tesla plant in Silicon Valley a while back. It's pretty cool. It used to be where they made Toyota Matrixes in America, but then Elon bought it. Yeah, that was back when they were still using the 18650s. But now, of course, Nikola Tesla has reinvented the battery by making a different shape LiPo battery. So he's super genius, obviously.
For a minute now, I thought Curry was going to say something. So, what are you? I was going to talk about planned obsolescence.
Oh yeah.
So, like that is another factor of right to repair, and
that came up during my talk with Lewis.
Yeah. So, like things that we kind of have or like use will sort of like fall into this. So, like DJI don't continue to supply parts for older copters. So, like if you own anything like a Phantom 3 or Phantom 4, gimbal parts are becoming increasingly rare, and you're kind of forced down that third-party route. One of the things that we can all relate to is the GoPros, the high-definition cameras that we use. Their repair scheme does not offer repair to GoPros involved with damage by any UAVs or drones. So you can buy the repair cover cost scheme with them, but if you mention to them, I think Curry's got a story, if you mention to like they were like, how was this damaged, if you say drone any part of this, they refuse to repair it. So it's fine if you accidentally dropped it down the stairs.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because like you think about if you had like someone skiing and they had it on their head and they crashed into a rock, 180-pound skier going down a mountain is actually going to create a lot more force than the impact of a small drone hitting something, and that's okay apparently.
Yeah, as long as you hurt yourself, apparently.
Is it GoPro?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say what happened to me is I had a little GoPro session, a little square one, and I had a weird little accident. I only put the quad into the floor at not a great deal of thing, but what happened is there's this little aluminium or something thing on the back that just peeled off, and it's just like a little tiny piece I thought this is going to be like $5, and it sort of brings on a lot of points, because if you phone up GoPro and say, "Oh, I just need this replacement part. This has just peeled off. I just need a new one." Slap it back on there, be good as new, and they're like, "I'm sorry, we don't do spare parts," which comes to like well, why not? I don't want to throw it away. This is a good camera, and I had a very weird conversation with them where they say we don't do repairs, we don't fix things, we replace them. So, and I did mention, they said, "What happened to it?" I said, "Oh, it was flying on my drone and it peeled off and it crashed." They said, "Well, we can't help you." So the next time I call back, it's a bit like being in a prison riot and someone's interviewing you and they say, "What happened?" And you say, "I don't know, I didn't see it. Perhaps it just fell or something." Saying that means like, "Oh yeah, send it in," which is bizarre, because we're in the UK. You send it to Holland or something and they send you back a refurbished one, because I was like, "Well, what do you do with the old one?" And they say, "We use it as spares for repair." And then I'm like, "Well, I thought you didn't have a repair center. What's going on with it?" It was a very weird situation. But if all they need to do is sell like a tiny piece of aluminium for like a couple of dollars or something, and
that's one thing that failed. Obviously there's a lot more that could fail in one of those. If I had to guess, probably the reason for doing that is GoPro is a pretty compact device, and it's kind of all sandwiched together. A lot of it's glued together. It's probably one of those things where the labor it would take to refurbish it is probably not worth what the camera costs. That's kind of a big problem. And maybe who knows, their refurbishment center might be in China, not Holland, where they can basically get the cost of the labor so low that it actually becomes worth it to fix it. But I mean, if you've ever taken one of those apart, it's very compact. There's lots of thin ribbon cables. It's almost like an electronic sandwich because it is so compact. And in that case, it's faster to send you a refurbished one than to sit there and fix that one. So they probably have a huge queue of, the broken ones or the spares. And then that's what something Louis Rossmann talked about. I was like, "Where do you get your spare parts?" He's like, "I get them from dead machines," because you cannot buy the new parts. But then, so you end up being like I guess you guys are all UK?
Except for Blue Owl.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, you end up being like a farmer where you have all these junky tractors in your field so you can pull parts off of them. And that's kind of how these repair people have to be. They have to basically scrounge for parts. Now, a lot of people are scrounging for parts these days with all of the chip shortages, but I'm just saying this has been going on for a long time. So it's unfortunate. I think there is, well, obviously there's always like, a capitalistic part of it too, where it's like, "Oh, it's not worth it to fix this." And that's happened with electronics in general. They make things so cheap that it's not necessarily because they don't want you to repair it. It's because they want to make it as cheap as possible. Like just like a Tesla, your phone is glued together because it takes like a tenth of a second for a machine to drive a screw. I mean, there's reasons they do it. They do it. They don't necessarily build it to say, "Haha, you can't repair this." It's more like, we're building it as cheap as possible. And because we built it as cheap as possible, that makes it more difficult to repair, making it less feasible to repair.
But what I want to know is, how much more expensive would it be for screws?
Well, if you take it like, however many screws there are in a device, and then you multiply it by 10 million iPhones, and then you're like, "Oh, we got to have the screw," and the time it takes. Now, if you open up something, there's tons of screws inside of it. But also, not just that, it's like, "Oh, look at how beautiful." Well, this is a Pixel 2. It's not that. It's old.
Tony's got a new phone.
They're like, "Oh, I can't have screws in the back of my phone. It's a fashion statement, right?" Like Apple's got the Apple logo here, and then you get the case, and it has a hole in it so people can see the Apple logo. That's a fashion product at that point, not electronics. And so, again, I'm just saying the consumers bring it on themselves as well. I'd like you compare that to, I've got to have something here. Oh yeah, here we go. A good old Casio graphing calculator. It's got screws on the back, but this would be considered ugly by today's standards. I mean, I think it's beautiful, but I think that's it's a big part of it. Or waterproofing. You're like, "Oh, you can drop your phone into the ocean and it'll be fine as long as you pick it up in 10 seconds or whatever." And glue is a really good way to make something waterproof. So it's not all about malice. A lot of it is a byproduct of just how things are made, and also the kind of features consumers want. Same thing with a small GoPro. If a GoPro was easier to fix, it would end up being bigger. I mean, to be quite honest, it would be like a regular size camera. And so there's a yin and a yang there. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying, didn't Apple in some of the early iPhone days put some sort of thing in their phone, so if you dropped it in water, it would sort of show up. So people that accidentally dropped it in the toilet and take it into repair, nope, you've dropped this in water.
Everything has that. A Nintendo Switch has that even. Yeah, they're just little stickers that turn pink, and there's usually 2 or 3 of them. But yes, it's very common because it's like insurance. They want any excuse to not fix it or to make you pay to fix it.
Yeah, because over in America, I don't know how. Like it's different in every state. You kind of have to, if you're persistent enough, they have to prove that it was you that caused the damage.
Yes, it does vary by state. It doesn't vary a whole lot. And then going back to the right to repair, I think Lewis is starting in Massachusetts, I believe. I can't remember. Oh, yes, because Massachusetts has what?
Yeah, I think that, like, right to repair started winning over there. I think
right. Well, because if talk about from a political angle, like the United States of America is a democratically elected representative republic, which means if you go to Congress, I can't say, "Hey, Congress, vote for right to repair." It's like, no, you elect someone and they vote for right to repair. But in Massachusetts as a state, because I know sometimes I know America is baffling to a lot of other countries. It's almost like 50 little countries, kind of almost like the EU in a way. At the state level, sometimes you have you'll have a direct ballot initiative, and Massachusetts, as a state in the state constitution, they have the option for a direct ballot initiative, which can be like, okay, voting season. Okay, residents of Massachusetts, do you want to legalize pot? Yes or no? And if it's over 50%, you get pot. Or same thing, right to repair Massachusetts. So that's why he's starting at the state level and also in that particular state. But once you get like to the, at least in America, once you get to the federal level, you're going to have Apple, Nintendo, and everybody else vomiting money at all these senators and Congress people to not do it.
I'm paying them not to show up at meetings.
Oh, and another big one, the John Deere, the people that make all the farming equipment. Farmers have known about farmers that got hit with right to repair long before any of us. It's just ridiculous because these companies use planned obsolescence and services like Apple. I was like, ooh, Apple's $1 trillion company. Apparently it's okay for Apple to be a giant evil company, but not other, it's like, ooh, we love Apple, but it's because so much of it is services and repairs division where like they make money based off the fact that they overcharge you to replace a battery in your phone. So by siloing the repair structure into their own, the Apple store versus like Louis Rossmann, they have that actually as part of their profit structure. So so it makes it more difficult to break, makes it so you cannot buy the parts, but Apple, of course, can get the parts. And then that way they silo more of the repair at an inflated rate, even though they don't pay their employees more, into their own corporate profit system. And what I told Louis regarding this, I keep wanting to say Louis, but he's not French. I keep wanting, I said, the way you have to drive it home is with cars, because, if my car breaks, I can go to, there's like 5 different auto shops within walking distance even. Yeah, independent. And that's what, people are used to, right? But you get to the point like with a Tesla, guess what? You can only take it to a Tesla dealership, which is why Teslas are not only expensive, but they're actually more expensive to insure with an I want to make sure I get that right. Because the cost of repair is higher because there's usually a waiting list for repair and there's only one place to do it.
Unless you go to the electrified garage run by. There you go, Richie. Send me a t-shirt, yo. Oh man. What was I going to say? Do we need this curry disclaimer? Or it's probably too late now.
We're talking hypotheticals on a company that's not DJI. We're fine.
Yeah.
So is this becoming a problem with your drone enthusiasm?
There's definitely some more walled gardens appearing and becoming more popular. So, I mean, there have always been some on the periphery, but the biggest one now is that the DJI, who are the kind of the big player in drones generally, have released a kind of camera system that is being adopted by more of the kind of race style drones, which is the DJI HD FPV system. So whereas sort of traditionally we've been using analog like CCTV cameras, like tiny little board cams with analog video transmitters and analog video receivers, which is just using PAL or NTSC or whatever. Now it's using a kind of proprietary encrypted protocol, which means that on the one hand you get the really nice HD image, but at a low latency because they're doing magic and we don't know what it is. But on the other hand, it is closed. So, for example, where they've released a new product that is their own drone that has kind of their own camera in it, if you have their goggles and you connect it to their new drone, all of a sudden the old systems that they were producing that we'd been kind of incorporating into our drones, all of a sudden you can't connect to those without a lot of faff trying to reflash it and things.
Were the old systems analog video?
So sort of the old system. So the are analog, and most of us here are still using just analog systems, and it's just PAL, and that's all fine, and that's all completely separate. But there are some people who have bought the DJI HD cameras, HD transmitters, and HD goggles, and have been putting those cameras and transmitters into their old carbon fiber type drones. And then DJI have released a new drone that is all kind of included in one. So rather than having a separate camera and transmitter that you're including into a build, this is just one ready to fly product. And if you get your, someone else might have to correct me on this, if you get your goggles to connect to one of those new proprietary drones, it won't connect to the old, or not very old, but months old transmitter and camera that DJI have released.
So it locks it out from using past revisions?
Yeah.
Do you have to update the firmware when you make it work with a new video? I'm just kind of wondering where the break point occurs.
I think that's probably the case. That is just a case of it's new firmware that it's using, but that would be my guess. But I don't know. I mean, Brandon,
get it back to that previous mode, as I said, but you have to. There's a lot of options to go back and forth to eventually get there.
You have to reboot into FPV mode. What I was led to believe is that and then rebind it. Yeah, oh god, that's really handy. What I from my take of it was they released a version FPV goggles V1, and you had little standalone. You had something called an air unit, which had the VTX and had a little camera that was connected via, those weird cables where they have to laser the ends off and then solder them, the tiny cameras. And that was the sort of like digital ecosystem that we could integrate into these carbon fiber quads, because before then they've been selling ready to fly drones like the Mavic, the Phantom, stuff that you probably have heard of. And their venture, their sort of like crossover was, hey guys, we've released digital FPV, got these little standalone units. They had a company, another company called Cadex, that made a slightly cheaper, sort of smaller version, but that didn't have diversity antennas on there. So there was only one antenna on there on the little, and we call them Cadex units. And then they released the V2 goggles. And the reason why they made the V2 was because they included this sort of in-between drone, which is called the DJI FPV, which allows you to have different levels of flying. Ones where it would fly and hover itself and you just push it around the sky. You still had like the stuff like return to home. And then you'd have something we call like angle mode, where you'd be able to steer it around, but it would always return to like level. and you've got like this oh shit button that you tap and it kind of saves itself. And when they released that, if you bought the V2 goggles on their own, you couldn't. There was some sort of registration problem. Like when you buy these goggles, essentially goggles to look through a CCTV camera, you have to register them. So like with them, it's like buying a car and then being like, oh no, we sold you the car, but you've got to register this car not only to the licensing people, but to us. That we want to know who you are, you bought this car, and what you're using it for. I don't know whether that's...
Well, yeah, you see that all the time. It's like, oh, I bought this, like a smart plug or whatever, right? But if it's not the same brand you had before, guess what? Now you have to sign up for their app, put it on the phone, and even to connect it to the same thing, like one of those Alexas or whatever. Yeah, it's like, oh, they want a password and a username for every brand of app, and it's annoying, but that's kind of what we come to. I was thinking when you're talking about broadcasting analog video, that probably takes up a decent amount of bandwidth.
Absolutely.
What frequency does it broadcast at?
That is at 5.8 gigahertz.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Would you like a breakdown of the...
For
you, Ben.
Oh boy.
A table with me that lists all the frequencies.
And what's the max number we can get in the air, Frank? Using the right spread, about 6
reliably.
Yeah.
All the way.
It's always good fun though when you're flying around and then someone else switches on and suddenly you're looking through your goggles and you can just see someone's shoes. That's a little bit of a tight bottom moment.
Yeah. Sure. Well, the reason I asked that, I was thinking about, when they switched over from analog to digital television, and you guys have analog or digital radio over there too, like, what's it called, HAB or SLAB or something? DAB. Yes. They do that because, you can take, what's TV? 6 megahertz. NTSC is 6 megahertz of width.
Never the same color.
Never the same color. Yeah.
Is there an acronym for PAL as well?
Aside from phase alternating line?
Yeah, I know. Well,
well, no, PAL is better, so we don't make fun of it. Yeah. Anyway, but so if you take that 6 megahertz and if you turn it digital, you can, it's like the reason they did it was because they wanted more bandwidth for cell phones, right? So I kind of wonder if there's going to be a point where, they could, again, the government could actually stop you from using analog video transmission in the future. Well, I'm sure there's restrictions on it anyway for whatever your version of the FCC is. Like, the transmitter range can only be this. You can only transmit in certain frequencies. But if you go digital, the same space where you fit one analog signal, we can fit 5 HD signals. And I guess I'm kind of saying what could happen down the road is you guys might just get pushed into that. Either, the analog stuff is, it would still work, but the bandwidth could get, reallocated.
Yeah, that's a kind of perennial rumor that goes about is Ofcom are gonna remove the unlicensed band around 5.8 gigahertz, and especially with kind of 5G being there and sort of taking up all the other bits of spectrum that are kind of available. And the spectrum is definitely getting more and more crowded.
You said it's 5.8 gigahertz?
Mm-hmm.
Is it 5G like 25? I think it's quite a bit higher than that.
Oh yeah. But I just mean there's bits of... So 5G includes loads of different frequencies, but it's basically just bits between other licensed bands. So some of it is like 60 gigahertz, but some of it is a bit lower. But I just mean that in terms of there is more and more bits of the spectrum being licensed off for applications like that. And so, like you say, the likelihood of this unlicensed band around 5.8 gigahertz being all of a sudden licensed is getting that's getting more and more likely. Well, but at the moment, there's nothing credible saying it's going to be licensed anytime soon.
I don't think the danger would be that it would become unlicensed. It might be, in order to use this unlicensed band, you have to use a higher efficiency transmission system, which would be your digital system.
Yeah, I mean unlicensed in terms of at the moment is basically between this megahertz and that megahertz, you can do whatever you like in that spectrum. And there's one at the 5.8 gigahertz for a little bit of that, and there's also another one that's commonly used around 433 megahertz, which is where all the kind of garage door closers and bits and pieces like that, and light switches, all that kind of thing, or older ones. That's where they are around. And so there's, that's the kind of issue is spectrum licensing. And so at the moment,
it's definitely become more busy just on the amount of 5.8 Wi-Fi. You certainly notice that if you're flying like indoors with something like this, the amount of devices, especially with most people at home, you're just seeing lines all over the video where it used to be fairly clean. It's just like just big Wi-Fi routers like bursting out of amazing amounts of strength.
Yeah, that's when people are like, "Oh no!" I mean, it's like, "Oh, the ISP is trying to screw over my phone and take the bandwidth." It's like, well, yeah, maybe, but the electromagnetic spectrum is a finite thing. You can't create more, unless you actually have quantumly charged particles tunneling and stuff like that. Until we do that, there's a finite spectrum of, eventually you get up into visible light, if you go too high. I guess we kind of got off the subject of right to repair.
So that's
we're learning stuff is fine.
So what we're kind of saying is that, there's this, to be able to get a low latency digital video system, there is currently this very closed kind of ecosystem, which they initially made very easy to incorporate into the sort of
so basically, they want you to buy a new drone to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And they're kind of making it more and more harder to integrate into the kind of traditional way of doing things. Make it easy to get into the walled garden and then harder to get out.
Especially if there's like really special sauce going on with the encoding, which there very well could be. It could be doing. Who knows? It could be doing predictive image reconstruction and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to say AI, but almost.
Yeah.
I mean, you ever hear about Google Stadia, that streaming service for gaming that is going to be the latest thing that Google probably cancels?
Yeah, I think it's already been announced that that's ending, right? I feel like I've heard something about that.
Yeah, but the thing is, all the companies are still everybody's investing in that. It's insane. Well, the reason I bring that up because I just brought up the the predictive image encoding. Like on the server side, the Google server or the whatever. It'll actually render if let's say you're playing a video game, like, oh look, there's a bad guy, I'm going to shoot him, but maybe you don't shoot him, right? The system will actually render different outcomes based on what it thinks you might do, and then it'll serve you the outcome of what you did to hide latency. So wow. I'm kind of wondering if you're racing drones, if they might be doing something similar. Like, okay, we don't need to transmit this low detail area. We don't need to transmit that we don't expect. That's the sky. It's a sunny day. We don't expect that to change, so we're not going to re-encode that. There's quite possibly a lot of pretty clever coding going on, and they're going to want to protect that, and also say, well, we have this investment in this clever code, and we get X amount out of the camera, but if we want to make even more, we sell the whole drone.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of an important thing. I mean, there's kind of at what point is it unreasonable? Because they've spent a lot of money developing this system that the open source community has had like a go at, but it's nowhere kind of near there. So isn't it their right to like make the money off of that they've put into it?
It just kind of sucks that they can. Yes, if they have a really good product, they can use it to leverage sales of something new. And again, like you talk about, there's a homebrew community, but there's a big difference. I mean, I'm just extrapolating, my theory on how it might work. But if you have someone like, oh, I'm just going to stream. Here's a camera. Here's bandwidth. Here's a receiver. I'm just going to stream data over that. Just dumping the data. But if they are doing something clever to basically give the impression of higher or lower latency, That kind of special sauce might be something that is, a home brewer is going to do it nights and weekends where they don't have to mow the lawn or take their kids to dance recital, versus somebody who's paid, $200,000 a year to work on that 40 hours a week. In a lot of cases, a home brewer isn't going to recreate Windows, or Apple iOS. So, there is a point where you might not be able to compete with the large companies as far as that stuff's concerned, especially if they're doing, fairly advanced image software manipulation.
And I guess on a similar point, earlier you were saying about, if you drop something in the water and it's got the little pink dot, like, isn't that reasonable? That if you screwed up and dropped something in some water, then you're going to have to pay to get it fixed?
Not just that, but if it's like, because yes, you're like, unless you're trying to say, I didn't drop it in water, and then they say that you didn't, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, this thing failed. So let's say, they send the phone to, China, and they've got like a 10-year-old kid trying to fix it. It's like, okay, what failed? Okay, well, this sensor or this piece of paper indicates that it went into water. It's like, okay, since this phone went into water, that means XYZ could have failed, right?
What's he saying? What?
Z. By knowing, like if you crash your car into a brick wall or it goes into a lake, it's going to be damaged in different ways. So yes, knowing that water was inside the unit it helps. You're like, okay, I'm not going to waste my time with these other things because water would break these things. So it can speed up the refurbishment process. Just knowing the truth. Yeah. I mean, like water isn't going to destroy the screen, but it could cause a battery charger to short circuit. So yeah, for instance.
Yeah, I mean,
although the conductivity of water is greatly exaggerated by Hollywood.
Yeah.
Unless there's salt
water.
in it. Yeah, salty water.
Delicious. Yeah. But for instance, it's like a lot of this right to repair argument. I don't know whether you're familiar with Linus Tech Tips, but they bought they bought a brand new one of the iMacs, not the M1 ones.
Yeah, the big screen one.
Yeah,
right?
the very large ones, and they Anthony like damaged the screen, and they went back to Apple and they were like, "Look, we damaged the screen. We'll pay for the repair." And they were like, we can't repair that. And then you go higher up the chain and they're like, no. And like half the time it's just trying to get your stuff, fixed, as in like, for instance, I've got a little bit here about recycling. Let's play a game. Anyone got any ideas? Have a guess at how many tons of e-waste every year in the UK. Throw some numbers out. Closest one wins.
E-waste or E?
E-waste.
Okay.
What's e-waste? Is that just like electronics?
Electronic e-waste. Yep.
Lots.
Well,
More than 4.
Quite
I'm
a lot
saying.
of phones
That's a
to
lot.
different places.
I mean, how many millions of tons then?
$1 billion tons.
No.
600,000.
No. It's 1.5 million tons of e-waste every year.
Do you guys use pounds over there? I mean, the weight, not the dollar. I can't remember.
No, we got pounds. So it's just getting confusing. We used to.
So this would be a
Miles
ton.
per hour.
This would literally be a metric ton then.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's it's very difficult to like almost like get things, like get parts and like maintain things and like stop it all just going to e-waste. You're almost encouraged to like just buy new and replace. And over here we've got like especially with like everyone can kind of get their head around cars. Back when I was like learning mechanics, I was taught about we've got like this sort of like law here that if you have work done within your warranty period and then you want to claim on warranty, they can't penalize you for using third-party stuff that's been made within the specifications of OEM, because there's no argument that, just because this has got that car's brand sticker on it, that it's not going to be as good or worse or better than the original OEM. And the way that they kind of divide the independent garages is if, say, you would, for example, wanted to open a Ford repair shop, you can do that as a franchise, and but then they kind of give you hoops and hurdles to jump over. So you've got to have so many lumens of light for your technicians to work in, and you've got to have a set amount of lifts.
So it's like opening a McDonald's.
Yes. And I don't know whether you kept up with the McDonald's ice cream machine saga.
Oh, I've heard about it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
BS. It's again, it's like, hey, look, we sell this much service time,
Yeah.
every week or every month, and yeah,
attached into their margins. Yeah, the machine, if you fill it a couple of mil over its max line, it won't reach its pasteurization cycle temperature, and therefore all roads lead to call the guy, or female.
And the unfortunate thing is that, like, if you are McDonald's, you're going to like, okay, this thing sucks, but corporate says we have to use this machine, and you're just going to roll that cost of the repair person coming into your overall budget. So to you, it's like, okay, screw it. The machine costs you this much, and the guy costs you this much, and so you just look at that as one cost. So for a lot of people, they probably don't even bother. You see what I'm saying? As a business, you'd be like, oh, well, that's just the cost of doing business. But again, yeah, like if you had a car and you could only take it to a certain shop or have a certain type of technician work on it, then as a consumer, you'd be pissed off. But a business is probably, they have 100 other things to worry about as well. So it's probably a good way to slip that in under the radar. Oh, and I had to look it up. Imperial ton and metric ton is actually the same weight.
What?
Huh?
Yes,
Yeah,
a metric.
Weird crossover.
Yeah, but you
But a gallon is different.
Yeah, so a ton here, like if you had like a 2-ton truck, it's 2,240 pounds imperial. A metric ton actually makes more sense. It's 1,000 kilograms, which is approximately 2,200 pounds. So interesting. Well, we always say like metric ton. We say that as a joke, like, oh, it's a metric ton of work or something like that. But interesting.
It's the same. In the UK, we're a weird mix. Most of Europe purely metric. Us in the UK, we like to talk about stones and pounds for weight. We talk feet and inches for height. All our road signs are in miles and miles per hour.
Yeah,
we'd call ourselves metric otherwise, which is just weird.
Yeah.
I went to the UK once, and it was weird to see the strange mix. I did like how all of your things start with zero. That from an engineering standpoint, I like that, or programming, like 0 floor, 0 train. I thought that was cool.
0 is a number.
Oh yes.
It's a value. It's a logical integer value.
I was actually dealing with that just yesterday. I was working on a pulse width modulation counter, and I'm like, am I causing an overflow of the period by going to 0 instead of 1 on the counter? And I'm like, well, I could fix it by going to 1, but I'm like, no, it has to start at 0.
Yeah.
Shoot, that reminded me of something else, but I can't remember. Oh yeah. Well, wait. Well, I think I brought this up earlier, but yeah, like with the cars, people expect that, I can take. Oh yes, I remember what I was going to say. Yes, so you have you're talking about a Ford dealership, or Joe Blow's car repair.
Yeah.
So if I don't, well, at least here in America, if you're someone, you're like, oh, my Ford is out of warranty, but I'm going to have it fixed at the Ford dealership. That's something that really well off people do, because it's going to cost you more.
Whores. Just
right.
Send it to the dealer.
right. So if you're, because I have this friend, and I think he's out of it now, but his family is they have this large Chevy dealership, and he'd always be like, oh, I'll take my car to the dealership to get this whatever done. It's like, woo, wow, big baller there. But I'm just saying, normally once your car's out of warranty, Because of course it's in warranty. Who cares? You take it to Ford or Chevy or whoever or Tesla. But then once it's out of warranty, the average person who doesn't want to blow all their money will just take it to whatever shop because it's going to be a lot more reasonable. Actually, I had that problem with my car. I had to replace my I have a Ford Focus wagon, which is made before 2010, so it's not like a roll-in computer, thankfully. But the muffler had a hole in it, right? So it was like, and I'm like, oh, I'll just replace the muffler, or I'll get it replaced. Like, nope. From the engine all the way to the tailpipe, one piece.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
What? So you're buying a catalytic converter?
Correct.
Everything, all one piece.
Yeah.
Well, but the thing is, that kind of makes sense from a cost point of view for the company, because every different way that you split up an assembly, you've got to have another SKU, and you've got to have more warehousing, you've got to have more logistics to do that. If there is somewhere a factory that just assembles those things together and they just buy that whole thing from them, then why would they sell the individual parts?
Well, exactly. It makes sense for the factory, but as like, let's say I was like super poor, right? So something like $100 US dollar, $100 muffler. I don't even know what they cost, but when I was a teenager, we had shitty cars, and we would, you'd go out there with a hacksaw and you'd saw off the muffler, and then you'd buy the pipe, to connect it. Then you put the muffler in place. Then you put a bunch of coat hangers around it. I'm just saying, like.
It's called being a Philistine.
Fake Beanton, isn't it?
Well, my point is, I don't know how much a muffler costs nowadays. It's probably gone up, but I don't know. Let's say it's $100 versus I think this cost me $600 just for the part. It's a pretty big difference. I mean, you're right. It used to be pipe, flex pipe, catalytic converter, pipe. But but same thing. Oh, look, we've got to put a clamp there. Clamp there. Oh, that adds up. One piece done.
Yeah.
That, again, it's like the screws.
The shipping of the one giant piece.
Yeah.
You've got to then hire a large shipping container, and you've got to fit. Surely you can put them smaller into Lego, and you can sell different. Only a certain truck can then deliver that extra long, because essentially you're delivering a pipe that's the length of a truck.
I don't know if this probably isn't super proprietary, so I can talk about it. Like, you guys probably know that I do stuff with pinball manufacture, right?
Yeah. I've got a bit of a dicey one regards Microsoft, and I'll mention a name, and if you just shake your head, I'll move on.
Oh, well, I was just going to bring up something like from the pinball stuff that we're working on.
Yeah,
right?
Carry on.
So, like this week, I've been finishing up firmware on the firmware, and I got to admit, we're going to have a closed source, because the last time we did one, it actually got stolen by a company in China. That's a big part of it, like intellectual property theft. Because I talked to Lewis about this too. If you've got your chip, whether it's controlling a drone, an airbag, a pacemaker, you put the software onto it, and you can just go onto it and read the software off, like that Nintendo Game & Watch. I think I have one here someplace.
Yeah, didn't you say like decompiling or something? You taught something.
Disassembly. Yeah,
disassembling. That's it.
Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, so Nintendo released this little guy like last Christmas, or
got Nintendo written on it, Ben. That means you're not allowed to touch it.
Yep, but it's all it is. It's a STM32 microcontroller. There's nothing special. You can buy this microcontroller anywhere, right? But what you can do with the microcontroller is you can say, even though there's the port to read it, which they left the port. See, they had the pins out, so I just made a little adapter, right? But anyone can read it. So what you can do as a manufacturer is you can actually set lock bits or even suicide bits. So saying, okay, if you try to read this chip, you won't get any data back. It'll be blank. Or if you try to read the chip, it'll erase itself. Like that's a feature pretty much in every little microcontroller. And whether or not a company enables it basically is just how big of a douche they are. So in Nintendo's case, you couldn't read the code, but you could read the contents of the RAM. And they thought that would stop hackers. Of course it didn't. So hackers just injected code into the RAM to create a buffer overflow and unlock the chip. But the Nintendo went after their YouTube channel and struck down their videos with copyright strikes, because they're like, oh, again, that's just an off-the-shelf microcontroller. It's like, I don't know, $7. It's actually a pretty good chip. But then they're like, oh, but you affected our proprietary code. So even though, yeah, you would say as a consumer, I bought this, I should have the right to reprogram that chip. In this case, Nintendo doesn't think you have the right to do that.
It really upset me that you cut the port the wrong side on that bit of plastic. Like that really.
Oh, in my video. Well, I made up for it. I tried to make it look like it wasn't a mistake, but it was. Like, oh, how about an SD card slot?
Okay, you are forgiven.
I just want.
Oh,
to
but
know,
no, you're right. I lucked out that lined up because that was so stupid on my part. So stupid.
I want to know if it's an
Oh, you better
STM32 chip that we would recognize. Is it an F7, F4, F3, F1, H7?
Let me get my
reading glasses on.
yeah, I have bifocals now.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
Could we flash beta flight to it? That is the question.
Yeah.
Well, just hold on. It's an ARM Cortex M7. I know that. It is an STM32 H7.
H7, there we go.
Yay! You can fly.
Fly it.
Will it fly? It's like Braille's skateboard all over again.
Next project for Dominic Clifton.
Oh wait, I have a few more numbers here. H7BD VBT6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Means nothing to any of us. Because you're
It'll mean something to Mr. Cleanfly.
So I should have just stopped at H7, huh?
Yeah. So we've got in latest news to make it slightly relevant. We've got a buddy, our friend Jack from DV3L. Spells devil, but like in elite speak.
I get it.
They've managed to get USB digital video out from the goggles, and now they're worrying about. There's a whole talk about it on our buddy Joshua Bardwell's podcast, but it may be something Ben might want to check out because they speak about it in a lot more detail than we do.
So they opened up a feature of the microcontroller that wasn't already there, like USB.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is on the DJI goggles, the HD goggles. So they previously actually released a little web app that would unlock something on your DJI goggles. I can't remember what it was.
The geo code, the geo lock.
Oh yeah. And now they've just done another one that will also allow you to get HDMI out of your goggles, so that you could put it on a screen and display it for someone else watching.
Yeah, which was an original feature that was there from this expensive separate controller that had HDMI out, and I think it was a buffer overflow that like opens a port for the USB, and as long as you had that code there that opens that port, then it would initiate sending the video over. And now everyone's like sat there waiting for DJI to release a firmware update where the drone has to have a firmware update, and then it will then be incompatible with your goggles, and then you have to update your goggles, and then that feature will no longer work.
Yeah, that's kind of well, I mean, yeah, going back to this thing, it has a USB-C port just for charging. I mean, this chip probably has at least one USB controller on it, if not two. So there's no reason they couldn't have it hook up to the USB port, but they didn't, because of course that would make it even easier for hackers. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, usually any of those chips, like, that chip probably has a CAN bus too, so that chip could talk to a car if it wanted to. And there's tons of stuff in these chips. Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot. It comes down to firmware most of the time, and firmware is intellectual property. And as I told Lewis, it's like, well, because he's like, you sound like a right to repair opponent, and I'm like, well, I'm just saying this is what they would say in response. It's like being a lawyer. A good lawyer doesn't ask a question that they don't already know the answer to. Where were you on the night of June 5th? Well, that you're saying it for the jury to hear. Same thing. I was like, okay, well, regarding a chip, this is what, corporate lobbyists would say, oh, our intellectual property is the software. In that case, you say, okay, all right, I don't want your software, but please sell me the chip with the software on it. Those kind of compromises, I think, is probably what we need to look at.
Yeah, I think, personally, I feel like a fair balance would be that if you're not selling the actual thing, the part that I want, at least let me know how to get it or make it or find another way of doing it. And I think that's a reasonable thing. And in the same way that car manufacturers, for 10 years after the last one, they have to make sure that there's the spare parts available for that car. I don't think we could do that for the GoPro, because having all those little bits is going to work. But maybe you could say, at least make sure that the drawing is available for that tiny little bit of spring steel or whatever it was.
Or when you're done and you can't be asked for that anymore, then put it out and then be like, hey, like, you can buy the repair manual for us for like, $3, and we're going to release schematics to this third party that we trust. If you guys want to make parts for as longer as it's possible, then do that, because you're not going to make it anymore. Everyone else is going to make money from it. And Apple are kind of closing that ecosystem by kind of being like, yeah, we'll recycle it for you. And then they get all their gold back that you've paid for.
Yeah, and by recycle it, that means it ends up in a pile in the street in China, and eventually it might. Africa. Yeah, it's a lot of it. It's very NIMBY, not in my backyard. Like, oh yeah, this is completely responsible e-recycling because we're piling it up in a different country or a poorer country. Yeah, I was gonna say, I forgot what I was gonna say regarding code or something. Oh yes. Part of the problem might be like, let's say, okay, here is our design from 5 years ago, right? And here's our new design. So we want you to buy the new design, but if you want to repair the thing from 5 years ago, and as you suggest, okay, well, let's make those schematics available, et cetera, et cetera. The thing is, the design from 5 years ago isn't probably going to be radically different from what they have now. So I say challenge. One reason they might be against it is like, okay, well, if you get our designs from 5 years ago, you can basically make a clone, and then you could actually improve that clone and then be kind of up to the level of what we're selling now. Yeah. And that's another issue, because there is a lot of intellectual property theft happening most of it's, in China. Like they'll build yours during the day and theirs at night. And a lot of companies are really gun shy about that. And I don't think it's so much that they care about the hobbyists. Well, it's not like, these hobbyists are going to do this for profit. They're worried about people. They've got the firmware. Now they can flash, 1,000 bootlegs. I think that's what they're concerned about. And it is a valid concern, but there needs to be a good balance where it also is, good for the consumer. And as I told Lewis, if you're going at it from a political level, you got to push the green, the environmental, because all the politicians, they have to be green. Even like Republicans or Tories or whatever you have over there, they have to be like pro-green. They can't go like dump oil in their backyard and stuff, right? Yeah. So these politicians, they don't know. Most of them don't know anything about electronics. I don't know about you guys, but our politicians are freaking ancient. But if you say green, it's like, it's not green to throw this phone away. Like, green. As an elected official, I have to be green. Okay, well, I can work with that angle. So I think that's kind of the way to do it, because it isn't. It's, throwing things away is not green, because it's, who knows where that's going to end up. And like, the thing is, you have to, in order to make, like you talk about getting the gold, like retrieving the gold from something is a very laborious process. Some people do it just for fun, but in order to actually retrieve anything of value, you have to kick that product, keep kicking it down the economic scale of places, to the point where, you have like little African kids. That happens. I'll have like kids digging through piles of junk looking for the shinies. I mean, but it actually happens.
Yeah, burning the isolation off off wires, like balling them up, burning it off, and then selling the copper.
Which is also not environmentally friendly, because you're really incinerating. Bad. You're not incinerating even like, at least when you burn coal, it's for energy. Like they're just burning wires to get rid of it. So I think if you can make ideally you keep that thing out of the trash for as long as possible. I mean, yes, eventually everything breaks, except for maybe like, some old engines or Toyota. But the other thing is, I know you're in drones, but like, I think if you talk about that e-waste, even though this doesn't weigh bugger all, I bet this is probably like 80% of the e-waste, at least for electronic devices. The companies got super addicted to selling you a $600 slab of glass that you can break by looking at it wrong, right? So you can buy a $500 TV it'll last you 10 years. This will last you maybe 2, right? So this breaking is good for the bottom line and not being repairable. And that's kind of a wasteful addiction that all these companies have. And there's a reason why Apple's $1 trillion company is because, people buy $600 things that they can break that easy. And
I don't know. We remotes done a lot for the repair, damaging of TVs.
The who? Oh, the Wii remotes.
Yeah.
To be fair, they also did a really good job of basically starting our entire hobby. So, yeah. the
Wii remotes.
Yeah, so the very
Multi-Wii
kind of the gyroscopes and accelerometers in the early Wiimotes, or at least the nunchucks that came with it, were kind of fairly fundamental to the hobby level grade of flight controllers. They were kind of the first
like the
affordable way
nunchuck. The nunchuck was just an I2C device. It was very easy to
exactly. So even the kind of the very, well, not the very first, but one of the early flight controller software types that is kind of branched off a lot of what we still use was called multi-Wii, and so that's kind of that multi-Wii phrase is still in the software in bits and places, I think.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, but the Wii was 15 years ago, and that was before everyone had a phone in their pocket. So at that time, it's kind of interesting, like how these things all have accelerometers and gyroscopes, but that's not really used a whole lot. But back when the Wii came out, that was all the rage. So, and that's good because you're like, oh look, I can interface this nunchuck, and that helps hobbyists understand things easily. And then when you have something popular like the Wii, there's 100 million Wii nunchucks out there. So guess what? There's going to be a lot of people who have access to it, and will be able to figure it out because it's common.
I'm just trying to look for the little DIY KK2 that David made with the separate accelerometers that were placed at different angles for pitch roll and oh man, I am.
I'm interested in what you talk about, Ben, with that little Game and Watch and sort of hacking it a bit and doing stuff with the firmware. Where do you stand on the sort of you buy something, and I'm thinking very much sort of the homebrew community with consoles. Like if you look at the original Xbox, that was hacked to death, and people putting out some really nice software, and the 360 and the PS4. Where do you sort of stand on the fact that I own this, so if I want to sort of hack about with it and try and develop my own firmware for it, that should be allowed? Because it kind of crosses over, things like Sony trying to
firmware
your property, and you sort of developing your own sort of hacks to make it run your own homebrew if you want.
So you're saying firmware or software?
I'm not saying firmware specifically. I'm saying people using exploits to run their own code, essentially.
Well, I will say that I brought up giant mega corporations a couple times. Microsoft is actually one of the more open ones, which sounds contradictory, but it's actually kind of true. I know maybe if there's any Linux people here, they're probably grinding their teeth.
I want to desperately say that surely Eric, of his second name, Eric Lundgren would disagree.
Well, I think of this because you mentioned game consoles and firmware. You can go and buy you get the Xbox One, or what's the new one called, Xbox Series X. Stupid name, by the way.
No one can get one of those.
Nobody can. Yeah. But actually, the Xbox One or the Xbox One, they're basically the same thing. One's just upgraded. You can actually go on the App Store on that console, and you can actually download for free developer mode, and it will actually put your console into developer mode. And you can make your own games and run them. And it's actually provided by Microsoft, which is actually really cool. So if you wanted to just make a homebrew Xbox One game, you can. It's completely legal and actually, sanctioned by the company. Whereas Nintendo, even though they've got all the cute, Pokemons and whatever, they're just not so friendly.
DIY multi-Wii board.
Oh, wow. That's old school. That's an old Arduino Nano, looks like.
Yeah, no, yeah. And then we made the multi-Wii boards with the little chips on there.
Oh, the IMUs.
Yep. So Shall we call it there before the editor gets annoyed? I've got a personal question though for you, Ben. Do you watch and enjoy Big Clive?
Who's Big? Wait, it sounds familiar. Can you?
What do you mean? Who's Big Clive? Get him off! Off! We cast the
It's a
out.
YouTuber, right?
Yeah, he's the Scottish guy who lives in the Isle of Man. Big Clive.
I'll have to
Big
look it up.
Clive
His name sounds familiar.
Oh, geez,
I will say, at least here in the States, we love YouTubers with accents. So you've all got an advantage with that. Or Australia, also. You're like, oh, I'm going to fix this computer. Something like that.
Dave from EEV blog. Yeah.
Yes, EEV blog. Yes. I always love
Adrian's Digital Basement. You must watch him.
Oh yes, I do watch his. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's British too, right?
No, man. He's from Kanakistan.
Oh, I can't keep it straight. I think like half of YouTube is also actually Canadian. A lot of people think I'm Canadian. I am. Well, I am in Wisconsin, which is pretty close to Canada.
Yeah, just don't throw over the border.
Yeah. Just swim over the world's largest lake, and you're there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll have to look up Big Clive. You know what? I have to go do some programming after this. Maybe I'll put that on my other monitor.
Yeah, there's two things. He does live podcasts every Saturday called Big Clive Live, but his main channel is Big Clive, and he does the doobie lamps where you hack like the LED bulbs and some lower output, and they last longer.
Oh. Yeah, I think I have seen that. It's like a hands channel with like a wooden bench.
Yeah. Check out Big Clive Live. Yeah.
Okay, I think I have seen that. Or he'll be like, "Here's a dodgy LED bulb."
The power shower unit, or all of those. Good fun.
I had a couple light bulb, my LED bulbs go out here, and I undid the lid of the lamp, and then I pulled out the bad bulb, and it's LED bulb, and there's a crack in the side of it, and it's like 3-year warranty. I'm like, oh, that's exactly how long this lasted. I was actually thinking about being like one of those kind of YouTube. I was actually going to put it in my lathe, and then like saw the bulb open with my lathe. Just like stupid YouTube crap. Yeah.
Oh man.
Did you guys have any other questions for me, or any besides the Big Clive thing?
We're so over time. Any Curry? Have you got? We can chat to you after this anyway, so you can stay on.
Oh, I got to go program as soon as we're done here. I got a current sensing. I'm working on a current ADC current sensing sampler. Right. I really messed it up. It was so stupid. It was on ARM, so you had to set up all the clocks. I had changed the boot clocks for better boot efficiency, but I forgot that I had the wrong clock hooked up to the ADC, the analog digital converter. So I was driving the ADC with a 32 kilohertz clock with a 32 divider on it. So my ADC sample rate went from like 300,000 hertz to 1,000 because I screwed it up. So I'm in the process of fixing it.
Yeah. Make me labs in the comments as well. Caroline says, yeah, Clive got a AVE, Arduino versus Evil. He got an X-ray hammer for getting into components, or as we call it in the automotive, percussive instrument.
Percussive maintenance.
Yep. Right. If you guys have enjoyed what we've been talking about, check out Lewis Rossman. Check out Rich Rebuilds. Check out Ben's channel. What are you, Ben hacking?
It's on YouTube. I just took my old channel that I had even before I did the show. It's Ben Heck Hacks, and I make a video every couple of weeks, but no longer on a schedule. I had enough of that for 8 years.
Yeah, he's even just go there for Bud content, and please give that little fluffy boy some treats from me, please.
Oh, but actually, Lewis's videos is where I learned about greenies, which cats do absolutely love.
Yes, I got my buddy onto that as well. Yeah, definitely, and check out Big Clive. And if you agree with Right to Repair and you want to help, I've donated personally. We will paste the link in the description, and yeah, so if you can support the movement, because I think it's very much going to affect all of us at some point. And thanks, Ben, for coming on and teaching us about stuff and being a great guest. Thank you.
And we learned about metric tons. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, stay in touch with the show, and yeah, if you like or put up with our bullshit, you'll love Big Clive live streams. Be walk in the park compared to this.
Well, Big Live Clive is pretty easy to remember.
Yeah. Thank you. You've been joined by everyone's favourite Lord and Master, Andrew /Rank.
Bye.
My little Tony.
Hi, Jack's mum.
Blue Owl. Did you learn anything today?
I did learn tons of things.
Still
tons
processing
or-
them all.
Yep. Everyone's favourite Curry Kitten.
Goodbye.
And Ben Heck.
Next time.
And I've been Bright Until I Fly. Thank you guys. Good night. Thank you to all our patrons.
Bye.